Hello and welcome back to the channel. On the 13th of July, it's time for Saturn to go retrograde in the sign of Pisces. So Saturn will be retrograde between 4 and 5 months. Saturn retrograde can be about having to repeat things. So you can find yourself doing things which you have already done this year. And Saturn retrograde can be about dealing with the past things, because the sign of Pisces is an accumulation of all your life experiences. So there's a strong indication that you will revisit things in the area of life where Saturn is transiting. Saturn retrograde can also make you feel like you are not making progress in the house it is transiting, and things can move quite slow. There can be feelings of regret and resentment and looking back at your past actions. But this is an opportunity to learn from the past. A retrograde planet like Saturn in transit is always good to learn from your past actions and mistakes and build resilience, because it will help you in your future. So with Saturn retrograde, the structure of the house that Saturn is transiting can also be disturbed. So you may have to take a step back and rebuild that foundation and take responsibility of that house. So let's look at how this transit will affect all the zodiac signs. And as always, I recommend looking at transits from the moon first and foremost. For Aries natives, Saturn will be retrograde in your 12th house of Pisces. So Saturn here will be working on a very internal level, because the 12th house is a moksha house, which basically means that its transit here is about cleaning up your subconscious mind. So what can happen are things that you have buried deep within your mind or under the carpet, or emotions that you have suppressed, they can resurface. So let me give you some examples. So firstly, this can be like a psychological resurfacing where past experiences can resurface, such as flashbacks and times where you have felt emotionally distressed. This is a time where repressed memories can resurface, and also past emotions where you haven't properly healed from. So it doesn't matter whether Saturn is direct or retrograde. In the 12th house, at some point, these periods of resurfacing can happen. But there's a greater chance of this happening during this retrograde period. These experiences can also be related to your network circle, and they can involve, past friends or relationships, your work, or even health-related issues. So everyone who is an Aries moon person will go through this resurfacing experience in some form or another 100%. When Saturn is retrograde, it means that you have failed to take responsibility earlier on. So now during this retrograde period, you have to take that responsibility. So for the 12th house, for example, you will have to take better responsibility over your expenses. So Saturn in the 12th house can reduce expenses. But firstly, you have to go through that exercise of budgeting and planning. So for example, you could be spending money on subscriptions. You might have a gym membership which you never use. So this retrograde period is a time to cancel these services that you don't use. And this will help you stop leaking money. So it's about cleaning things up. And if you can do that, then Saturn obviously can help you reduce your expenses. If cleaning up your expenses is something that you haven't thought about, then this is a good time during this retrograde period to have a think about that. And it could be anything. So you might be able to get better gas or electricity deals. You might be able to get better mobile phone deals. So it's about cleaning up the excess expenses which you are incurring. If you are in a foreign country, or you don't have to be in a foreign country, so you could be in a different city or town in the same country, and wherever you are living at the moment, Saturn retrograde is a time of self-realization where you will begin to fully understand and you will have to accept your reality. So in today's society, many people in their 20s and 30s are always keen to travel and explore and move to different parts. But it's not until a person goes through the actual experience that they realize the reality, the difficulty of being in an unknown or new place. Because sometimes people think it's easy, but it's not until they experience the challenges, the loneliness, or the expectations don't quite match up to what they thought. So a sense of self-realization can happen with this Saturn retrograde transit. Saturn represents boundaries, and in the sign of Pisces, there are no boundaries. So Saturn has the difficult job here to define some clear limits. So when Saturn is retrograde, it's a good time to pause and readjust aspects of your life. So for example, in terms of work, so far in 2025, if you've been, for example, asked to go above and beyond what you're expected to do in your work, or you might have been asked to work evenings and weekends and long hours. So this retrograde period is a time to push back. So learning to say no and creating a protective barrier so that your well-being is not harmed. So this is a time you could have a talk with your boss to define a more clearer role and clear responsibilities. When Saturn is retrograde, the structure of the company or organization or the team where you're working can change. And if your job or your workload is a little bit all over the place, so things can be a little bit more defined during this period of retrogression. In terms of your network circle, if you've been socializing a lot and you've always been, there for your friends, so this is a time where you need to have a better balance between, your social life and your personal life. So it's like a balancing act. And as Saturn is ruling your 11th house, you can also come across unconventional people and old friends. But you have to be very careful who you trust with Rahu and Saturn in these houses. So if you've made any new friends or connections this year, you just have to be a little bit cautious in terms of what you're sharing with them. For business, Saturn retrograde can be a period of slowing things down and changing things in your business, such as outdated practices, strategies, policies. So definitely the position of these planets can show something is changing, letting go of some of the things and being innovative as far as your business and livelihood is concerned. For Taurus natives, Saturn will go retrograde in your 11th house in the sign of Pisces. So Saturn has been transiting your 11th house for the past 3 or 4 months. So generally for many Taurus people, especially Taurus moon sign people, this transit should have started off quite good. So let me know in the comment section how this transit is going for you so far if you are a Taurus moon person. So now when Saturn is retrograde, it is retrograde in a Karma Trikona house, which is related to your desires. And as such, Saturn will slow you down when it comes to your goals and what you're hoping to achieve. Saturn retrograde can make you reevaluate your current path and motivations regarding your career, business, and relationships. So, for example, this transit is happening in the sign of Pisces, which is a romantic sign. So you may have to re-examine the true value of any relationship you are in or your relationship with your friends. So you will re-evaluate the responsibilities of the relationship in terms of ownership of actions, words, and contributions. The 11th house retrograde transit of Saturn in terms of income. So when there is a retrograde planet here, any money from the past which you were expecting can come to you now. So this is more for those who, I suppose, run a business of some sort where you've been waiting for an invoice to be settled. So now you will receive the money. If you run a business, this is a time you can also invoice for work that you may have done in the past. So anything related to the past is what can be fulfilled right now during this retrograde period. Saturn retrograde in the 11th house can also act unconventionally. So for example, you may get some sort of passive income here. You might get a return from any investments from the past. You may win a prize of some sort. So you may get some sort of benefit here without doing any work if you're lucky. Now, the other result with Saturn retrograde, and bear in mind Jupiter will also be retrograde for a period from October. So if your career is not stable, this is a time where your flow of income can be interrupted during this retrograde period. So something to bear in mind. Saturn is ruling your 9th house. So when it is retrograde, you can travel or return back to a place where you have already been to. And this Saturn retrograde can allow a more deeper exploration of a destination. And this is a time you can also travel to a place which you have always wanted to go. So it's not necessarily always traveling back to the same place, but you're kind of stopping what you're doing and going back to fulfill a desire you have always had from the past. So that can also happen. The 9th Lord also represents your beliefs, and when it is retrograde, this is a time you may introspect and question previously held beliefs and philosophies. And because Jupiter will also be retrograde from October, there will be some important lessons that you will learn from now until the end of the year. Because retrograde planets, they allow a person to think on a more deeper level and reflect on things from the past. Saturn is ruling your 10th house, so you have probably been very busy in your work so far this year, more than usual, because Rahu in the 10th house is really making you more driven. So now this retrograde period of Saturn is a good time to create a better work-life balance for yourself, because K2 is currently in your 4th house. So you are sacrificing a little bit of your emotional and physical well-being. So Saturn retrograde is an opportunity to just slow down a little bit and look after your well-being a little bit more. For Gemini natives, Saturn will be retrograde in your 10th house of Pisces. So when a planet is retrograde in the 10th house, it can show something changing in your work. So it's not always a job change, though changing jobs can happen, and changing jobs can happen, anytime. But Saturn retrograde here can show changes in the organization you might be working for. So for example, there could be a restructure in your company, which as a result may change your responsibilities, especially because this is Saturn, which is retrograde. The structure could be changing. The foundation of the company could be changing, or, your team could be changing. So you might get like a new manager, for example. And Saturn retrograde here can also show your personal structure is changing, where you get a, greater sense of clarity in relation to your career. Now, Saturn in Pisces, it struggles to find boundaries. It struggles to build boundaries, because Pisces, it's just the ocean. So Saturn doesn't know where to begin. And so therefore this year, you may have found yourself having to do more work than you need to. So there could be greater responsibilities so far this year for you. You might have been asked to work late nights, weekends. So you're kind of giving a lot of service, being required to put in a lot of effort. Now, this retrograde period of Saturn is a time for you to slow down and define some limits in terms of the work you are being asked to do. So you need to, slow down and try to build some boundaries to protect yourself. This is a time where you may push back on work, and this is a time you can also request a more clear definition of your responsibilities and duties. The sign of Pisces is good for creative jobs, and this Saturn retrograde will further give you a boost, as retrograde planets, they are linked to heightened creativity and unique approaches to problem solving. So for example, if you are a designer, this is a good time where you can refine your work. If you are a leader at your work, this retrograde can also help you find unconventional solutions, and you might be thinking about strategies. So this transit can also help you think outside the box. Saturn is ruling your 9th house, and when it is retrograde in the 10th house, if you are a student, then this is a time to focus on fundamentals. Focus on foundation concepts and strengthening your basic knowledge before you move on to the more advanced stuff. So this is an opportunity to seek clarity in what you have learned so far. And this is a period where a person could also resit exams or revisit past lessons, because your Jupiter is in the 1st house and Rahu is obviously in your 9th house. So this is a good time to relearn things. The 9th house also represents foreign travel, and Saturn is also aspecting your 12th house. So this retrograde influence of Saturn can show traveling to places that you have been to in the past, or places where you were in the past. And this can trigger nostalgia and personal memories. When the 9th Lord is retrograde, it's a time where a person can also feel retrospective luck. So, you can look back at past events and label them as lucky or unlucky. So you can kind of feel a sense of gratefulness that, something happened or something didn't happen, which at the time, you were not too keen, or at that time you might have been disappointed that it didn't happen. But now you're kind of looking back and reflecting, and you can say to yourself, I'm so glad that this happened. Now Saturn is also ruling your 8th house, and as I mentioned, it is aspecting your 12th house and 4th house. So in terms of health, if you have suffered any knee, joint and bone problems, then this could return, where you may have to have like a procedure or go through some sort of healing to recover. For Cancer natives, Saturn will be retrograde in your 9th house of Pisces. So the 9th house, along with the 1st and 5th houses, are the naturally fiery houses in astrology, and in the sense that they represent starting something new or expanding your life. So when Saturn is transiting the 9th house, anything new that you are beginning can be a bit challenging. Now, when Saturn is retrograde here, it shows that before you can expand your life or grow and move forward, there is something from the past that you need to learn from. So any actions or events or experiences from the past, you need to learn from, or there are some things that you need to sort out related to the past before you can move forward. So for example, if you are getting married for the second time, you may have to wait for your divorce to come through before you can get married again. Or there could be feelings from past relationships which you need to process and close off before you can start a new relationship. Saturn retrograde can also make you feel some anxiety and fear inside. So you might have a fear of repeating the past mistakes, or a fear of getting heartbroken, and some fears and doubts about the future. So I'm giving an example of relationships here because Saturn is ruling your 7th house, but it could be any area of life where you need to close something off before you can begin something new. Now, because Saturn is also ruling your 7th house, when it is retrograde, you will be thinking about what you really need in a relationship or partnership. So if you are in a relationship, you are not quite sure whether to move forward. You could be unsure about the future. So this is a time also where someone from the past can come back. So when I mentioned earlier that there is something that you need to close off and get some clarity over before you can move forward. So this could be one of the things. Now, when the 7th Lord is retrograde, it's also a time where you can get to know a person from the inside. So aside from going out with someone, having nice dinners, doing activities, this is a time instead where you can get to know a person at a more intimate level. So you are basically learning about your partner at a deeper level, because this is the 9th house of learning we are talking about. So hopefully some of that will resonate. In terms of other results, there could be traveling which can happen. So it could be that you need to return to a country from the past. So if you are living in a foreign country or town, you may need to return back to your hometown during this retrograde period of Saturn and Jupiter. And Jupiter will also be retrograde from October. So anytime during the next 6 months, I would say traveling back to your hometown or some sort of travel to a country you have already been to can happen. Saturn retrograde in the 9th house, if you are a student, can also show a break or a temporary pause in your studies due to health or personal circumstances or maybe financial difficulties. Or it could be that if you are an international student, there could be some issues with your visa that could be there. If you don't experience a break as such, when a retrograde planet like Saturn is in the 9th house, it's a time to learn the fundamentals of what you are studying. So if you are a year 2 university student, for example, this is a good time to recap what you learned in year 1, as there might be a prerequisite to what you are studying. And a person can also repeat an exam during this time. 9th house also shows your beliefs and life philosophies. So this retrograde Saturn will want you to look at your personal framework and how you are living your life. Your goals and visions for the future have to align to your authentic self. So for the next 6 months, because your Jupiter will also be retrograde, it's a time to reflect on what matters to you and what you need to change. Because with Saturn in the 9th house in Pisces, you have to be very realistic about the future and look at how you are going to build your future and prepare for your future. Because Saturn in the 9th house won't let you just wing it. So you need to organize where you are going in your life. In terms of work, as Saturn is the natural significator of career, this is a recommended time to focus on completing existing tasks. Focus on getting everything up to date before taking on new projects or tasks. So that's not always easy, especially when new tasks keep coming through, but this is a good time to prioritize anything unfinished if you can. The 9th house is the house of luck, and when a retrograde planet like Saturn is here, you can feel a sense of retrospective luck. So you can look back at your individual past experiences and actions and say to yourself, I was lucky or I was unlucky. So you are giving your subjective assessment about things that happened to you in the past. For Leo natives, Saturn will be retrograde in your 8th house of Pisces. So this is the house of going through really intense emotional experiences. And this is a house where a person loses some control and power, which can force a complete personal change. So if you are a Leo moon person especially, let me know how this Saturn so far in the 8th house is treating you in terms of big changes happening either physically or psychologically. So now when Saturn is retrograde in this house, it means that you may have to repeat an uncomfortable transformation or go through another life transition, or it's a time where you may have to deal with some sort of fear again. As we are talking about the 8th house, in terms of health, this can be a time where a person may need to have a redo surgery or need to go through some sort of treatment again. And this can obviously cause some extra anxiety and apprehension. There is also a risk that a condition or a disease from the past can return. So you may have to go to a healthcare center for a checkup during this time. So there are strong indications of this, especially if you have suffered anything major in the past. Saturn retrograde in the 8th house can also cause digestive issues, joint and knee issues, and sleeping problems. In relation to your work, when Saturn is transiting through the 8th house, you may need to rebuild your reputation. But when Saturn is retrograde, it means that your starting point is right back at the beginning. So Saturn retrograde is about rebuilding the structure of your career, of your team, of the organization, especially if you are a leader. Saturn retrograde in the 8th house is about repeating some work-related things, especially, this could be changing your job, being invited for a second interview, or simply just restarting something related to your work. Both Saturn and Jupiter are planets of learning, but Saturn's lessons are learned through the hard way. So when Saturn is retrograde in Pisces, one of the things that you have to learn during this transit is how to be more emotionally intelligent in terms of other people in your life. So this is a time where you have to try to learn to understand other people's emotions. So a time to focus on listening and observing non-verbal clues and considering others' perspectives. So for example, say you have a baby. So you have to be able to understand a child's emotion. You have to be able to interpret what the baby wants. The sign of Pisces is about being receptive. So that is one of the things that you have to try and develop during this Saturn retrograde period. And with K2 also in your 1st house, this is a time, or the next 15 months I should say, is not about you anymore. It's about focusing on others in your life. In terms of relationships, because Saturn is ruling your 7th house, it's a similar type of result where you have to be able to understand your partner's emotion and use strategies to improve communication and build a better understanding between you and your spouse. This is also about revisiting past moments in your relationship and correcting past mistakes and seeking that reconciliation. If you are single, then when the 7th Lord is retrograde, it's a time where you can come across unconventional people. So if you have some sort of desire to meet a particular type of person or some sort of sexual desire, because the 8th house also represents intimacy. So this is where, you can experiment or experience something. So this can happen during Saturn retrograde. And it can also happen because your Rahu is also in the 7th house. A retrograde planet in the 8th house can also show changes to a will, changes to any inheritance, so making those alterations. This transit can also show making insurance claims, so the insurance that you pay on a yearly basis. So now is the time to go back and claim anything that you are eligible for. This is also the house of tax. So a retrograde planet here can cause some problems with returns that you have filed in the past. For Virgo natives, Saturn will be retrograde in your 7th house of Pisces. So the 7th house is the house of balance and harmony. And when Saturn is here, it can cause disharmony and some emotional distance. So if you are a Virgo moon sign especially, let me know in the comments section how this Saturn transit in the 7th house is going for you in terms of your relationships. Now, when Saturn is retrograde, if you are in a relationship, it's a time where you need to go back to the beginning and repair a relationship. So, for example, if there was any infidelity in your relationship, as Rahu was in your 7th house previously, then this is a time you need to repair and resolve past issues. If in your relationship, expectations for the future or the needs of your partner have changed, then this is the time you need to have those discussions and conversations and decide if it is still worthwhile to continue your commitment towards each other. So Saturn is testing your commitment. And when it is retrograde, it means that something is broken. So you need to go back and rebuild it from the beginning. So that is essentially what is happening in terms of personal relationships during the next 6 months or so. Some rebuilding and patience is required. If you don't have a partner and you are single and you're searching for someone, this retrograde period will make you rethink your expectations of a partner. So Saturn in Pisces is about being realistic, because it is unlikely that you'll get someone who you dream about. Because Saturn is not a romantic planet. It doesn't have too much interest in personal relationships. So you need to be realistic, and this is a time to really think about what is best for you rather than what you truly want. The 7th house represents agreements and contracts. So when Saturn is retrograde, it's a time to review contracts. Any existing contracts that you are part of before they get renewed, it's a time to identify the key clauses and decide whether they are still good for you. This can also be a time where you may need to dispute any matters. And with Rahu in your 6th house, you can be successful with any legal matters. In terms of career, Jupiter and Rahu are well placed. Saturn retrograde is a time where changes can happen. So this is a time you can hear back from applications that you may have submitted earlier this year. So you could have interviews and a good chance of being successful if you want to change your job. If you do start a new job during this retrograde period of Saturn, there can be a little bit of apprehension before starting a new job. So they call it new job jitters, where you are excited but also worried, which is normal because people do have a fear of what to expect when starting a new role. Saturn is aspecting your 9th house. With this retrograde energy, you can learn from past mistakes. So you might reflect back on a situation and use it as a learning opportunity. Or because your Saturn is in the seventh house, this is a good time for observing and learning from other people's mistakes. So for example, investing money. So they could be someone who hasn't made the best choices. So you could learn from their mistakes. Or it could be that you are a university student and there is someone who is a year above you, and you can learn from them in terms of how to prepare for an exam. So whenever there is a planet in the 7th house, it can have an influence on you, regardless whether it is retrograde or not, as it will be aspecting your 1st house, which is the house of yourself. For Libra natives, Saturn will go retrograde in your 6th house in the sign of Pisces. So this is the house of your daily routine, where you wake up, you go to work, you come home, you do your shopping and any other activities or hobbies that form part of your week. So when Saturn is retrograde here, it means that you may not be able to follow your routine as you would like. So some change in the routine can be there. But you can also use this as an opportunity to refine your day-to-day life. So this retrograde is an opportunity for you to optimize your schedule and habits and improve it. So it can be like a self-audit where you can identify where you are wasting time and where you should prioritize time. So this is a good time or a chance to become more productive and remove anything in your schedule which doesn't really help you. When we talk about routine, that also involves work, so your day-to-day job. So there could be changes in your work. The way some of the tasks are done at your work can change, the processes can change, and even the people or your responsibilities can change. So if you have applied for any jobs in the past 6 months, this is a time you can also hear back from them if you haven't already. So it's possible to change your job during this period. During this time, you can also go back and any responsibilities which you haven't fulfilled in terms of completing tasks. So you might have just been sitting on them. So this is a time to complete them. So good time to complete anything unfinished or anything pending. The sign of Pisces represents things which are hidden, and therefore this Saturn retrograde can create minor internal diseases. So the 6th house, it represents your stomach area, which includes digestion, and as such an individual can experience a slowness in digestion, which this transit can also lead to things like gas and heartburn. So because Pisces is a water sign, you have to take care of what you are consuming in terms of liquids. The sign of Pisces, where Saturn is retrograde, it represents love and romance. So this transit is a re-evaluation of your expectations in any relationship you are in, or the expectations if you are looking for a person. When the 5th house lord is retrograde, so Saturn is ruling your 5th house, so when it is retrograde, it can be a time that you can reconnect with people from the past, but it can also be a time where you can deepen your relationship with yourself. So you can make choices that support your own health and happiness, setting boundaries that preserve your own energy. So it isn't that much about the outside world. It can also be about connecting with yourself rather than other people. So connecting with yourself on a deeper level and you being in control of your own life. Now, having said that, when a planet is retrograde, it can also act unconventionally. So Saturn being the 5th house lord, being retrograde, which means that it can be unconventional, and with Rahu in your 5th house, this can show a period of an unconventional relationship if it is supported in your natal chart. So this could be anything like a long distance relationship, It could be a non-monogamy relationship. It could be that you might be dating someone with a significant age gap. So Saturn retrograde in Pisces can also show this. The sixth house is the house of perfection. It is a very analytical house because the natural ruler of this house is Mercury, is Virgo, and Mercury is the ruler of Virgo. So with Saturn retrograde here, there can be a tendency to overthink and repeatedly overanalyze situations. So overanalyzing past events. And when a person is thinking too much about the past, it can make it difficult to move forward. And Saturn being retrograde, it is not really moving forward. And therefore, the progress of your life can be a little bit slow, or it could be halted. But sometimes there are things from the past which do need sorting out before you can move forward. So that is why you can use this time to complete anything or process any emotions that you need to and complete anything that is unfinished. Saturn is ruling your fourth house, and when it is retrograde in the sixth house, this is a time to complete any pending property related issues that may need resolving. So if there's anything that is not working in your house, this will be the time to fix it. For Scorpio natives, Saturn will go retrograde in your fifth house in the sign of Pisces. So the fifth house is one of those houses which represents moving ahead in your life. So trying to progress in your life, because it is naturally a fiery house. So the houses 1, 5 and 9, they represent starting something new or expanding your life. So now when Saturn is retrograde here, there can be feelings of frustration due to a lack of slowness. So you can feel impatient or irritated with things not moving at the desired pace. So if we look at your chart, Jupiter in the 8th house shows that your life is going to go through a transformation. Your life is going through changes. And with Rahu in the 4th house, so together Rahu and Jupiter are showing movement or change where you are living, especially if you are a Scorpio moon sign. So Saturn retrograde here can be delaying those kind of things. So delaying moving, or if you do move, adjusting and settling into any new place can take time. So that's what Saturn retrograde, and when Jupiter goes retrograde, it can show. So delays in moving or delays in feeling settled, because when there are new things happening in life, it takes time to feel comfortable and secure. And you could also be trying to manage any internal fears or doubts. Saturn retrograde in the 5th house has the power to act in an unconventional nature. So some people say that Saturn gives opposite results to what it signifies when it is retrograde. So the key word is unconventional. So just like Rahu and Ketu can be unconventional, so they move in a retrograde motion and they bring a heightened sense of emotions. So that's exactly what Saturn retrograde here is doing. So for example, if you are single, this is a time that there can be an unconventional relationship. So there could be something non-committed and casual, for example. Especially when Rahu is transiting the 4th house, you want to put your happiness first. You're trying to find your happiness. Saturn is the natural significator of work. And with Ketu in your 10th house, these positions of these energies aren't ideal for career growth, especially if you are in a service-related work. So if you're struggling to find a job, during this retrograde period, you can find a job, but it's likely something short-term. And it could be something which is like a step down from the work that you have done previously. so it could be less pay. If you are already employed, this combination of Saturn retrograde and Ketu can show changes happening in your job. So there could be a restructure, there could be changes in responsibility, you could be transferred to another area, or if you are a contractor or a temporary member of staff, your role could also be coming to an end. Saturn retrograde in the 5th house and Ketu in the 10th house are better combinations if you are working for yourself, like being self-employed or freelancing or being an external consultant. The 5th house represents children, and when Saturn is influencing this house, it shows that you might be too strict of a parent. So therefore, this retrograde Saturn in this house can make you re-evaluate your approach to parenting. So if you have been a strict parent and you are having some clashes with your child, you should look to reset the boundaries with your child. So obviously every child and situation is different. So this retrograde is showing some work needs to be done. If you are due to have children during the next 6 months, Jupiter and Saturn will both be retrograde at some point. So that is nothing to be fearful about. Saturn retrograde can show fears and doubts in your mind about being a good parent, for example. So at the beginning, when I mentioned delays in feeling comfortable. So this could be true for someone who's about to have their first child, for example, because it takes time to feel secure and comfortable as a parent. It takes time to feel comfortable if you are moving to a new place. If you are having health treatment, it takes time to feel comfortable from treatment. So Saturn retrograde covers all these different types of scenarios. For Sagittarius natives, Saturn will go retrograde in your 4th house in the sign of Pisces. So the 4th house represents your memories and past experiences, as well as your home, family life, and living conditions. So since Saturn has been in the 4th house, if you are a Sagittarius moon person, it shows that you won't be feeling that happy in your home environment, basically. Or you won't be feeling comfortable, I should say, in your home or with the people you might be living with. So if you are a Sagittarius moon person, let me know how this Saturn is going for you so far. Now, when Saturn is retrograde in the 4th house, you can feel a sense of being trapped and stuck where you are living. So for example, you might be renting a house which you may not enjoy living in, but you are stuck there until the lease can come to an end. Or you might have been planning major works in your house. You might be doing, renovations, but it's being delayed or it's taking a long time to finish. And this could be causing some pain and anxiety. So this retrograde is about rebuilding your sense of belonging and foundation and bringing your authentic self to the forefront. So when this energy is focused inwards, like this retrograde transit will do, a more genuine expression of your personality and a clearer understanding of your path can come out. So with the example of residence, if you are not enjoying where you are living, so you will be planning and thinking about your next move. Where do you want to live? If you are doing work in your house, what steps can you do to get this work done faster? Or if you're looking to buy a house, what can you do to improve that prospect? The 4th house represents your feelings and emotions, and it is the house of happiness. And when Saturn is influencing this house from the moon, you are not feeling that happy. So when Saturn is retrograde, you'll be thinking about the past. You'll be reflecting on the past, on your past experiences related to your home, family, and also your past emotions. You could be reflecting on your upbringing and thinking about these moments where you were hurt. You could be thinking about past trauma and any unresolved issues, and this can make you feel quite sad. So this will be making you think, what can you change from the way you are brought up, or what values your family instilled in you. So there can be some disagreements with your family during this time. And it's worth noting K2 is in the 9th house. So definitely you are not feeling that connected with your existing values. With Saturn retrograde here, you are basically confronting the past, learning from mistakes, and rebuilding a new emotional foundation, and creating a more stable and nurturing environment for yourself, both internally and externally. So try to create the best you can and the best that is available to you in order to become settled in your life. Saturn retrograde in the 4th house will be causing some intense emotions. And another reason for this could be because of poor health of your mother or your own health. So especially if you are a senior person, there can be past health issues which come to the surface, which you may have to manage. Saturn is ruling your 3rd house, which represents your courage, your communication and hobbies. So it's a very important house. And Rahu is currently transiting here, which is a great placement. The 3rd house is also a desire related house, as it represents things that you like doing. And Jupiter is aspecting this house. So it's a really good time to make use of your 3rd house during this period. With Saturn retrograde, there is a lot of potential through self-reflection. This is a time that you can reach out and catch up with your old friends and people in your network circle who you may not have spoken to or seen for a long time. This is a good time to start a hobby that you have always had a desire to do and set up an actionable plan. So if Saturn in the 4th house is giving you some depressive thoughts or sadness, the 3rd house is where you can focus your mind on. Saturn is ruling your 2nd house, so the retrograde motion is a good time to reorganize your family dynamics in terms of communication, responsibilities, expectations, and obviously finances. With career, Saturn retrograde is a good time to finish any old projects and any pending tasks. And with the aspect on the 10th house, you will assess your career path during this time. So during this time, a person can repeat a process. So for example, if you're someone who changes jobs every year or every couple of years, so you might start that process again to look for a new job if you feel like you need to move. For Capricorn natives, Saturn will be retrograde in your 3rd house of Pisces. So Saturn is ruling your chart, which means that you will have some of the natural qualities of Saturn instilled in your personality, and therefore you may feel the effect of this retrograde transit a little bit more. So the 3rd house is a good house for Saturn. So if you are a Capricorn moon person, let me know in the comment section how this transit is going for you so far. Now, when Saturn is retrograde, first of all, in terms of work, it can mean something can be changing. So this is a time where there could be a job change. With Saturn retrograde, there can be a repeat of a process and you could find yourself doing a job which you may have done previously. So you may have to cover someone. Or if you're hoping to get a new job, you may have to attend the 2nd or 3rd round of interviews. So if you are hoping to get a new job, you do have to be a little bit patient. But with Rahu and Jupiter, which will also be retrograde, it means that this is a good time to find your dream job. So there is a good chance that you could find the type of job that you want, including the salary and the responsibilities. If you don't change your job, your role can change. So working in the same company or organization, but you may get promoted. So Saturn is the lord of your chart, and when it is retrograde, there could be a need for repeated actions or repeating some kind of movement. So for example, this may be a time where you may have to visit family members continuously over the next 6 months for whatever reason. This could be traveling to a place where you have already been to in the past, where there could be some sort of responsibility that you need to fulfill. This could be a time where you may restart a hobby from the past, so something you did maybe when you were younger, so you can go back to it. This is the house of communication, so you may be having the same conversations over and over again. So this third house transit of Saturn in retrograde motion is similar to Mercury retrograde, where you need to be clear and precise in how you communicate to avoid any misunderstandings. And if you do find yourself traveling, you have to allow plenty of time. Saturn retrograde can also make you experience some anxieties, as you might be feeling overwhelmed with so many things going on in your life. So Jupiter in the 6th house is making you very busy. So mentally you might be busy as well, processing information, making decisions, and things can be going very slow. So it is a worthwhile time to have a schedule and try to be organized so you can keep a track of everything that is going on. Saturn is ruling your 2nd house, and when the second lord is retrograde, it's a time to reorganize your finances to suit your current lifestyle or situation. So for example, you may be earning more money now with Rahu in the 2nd house. So this is a good time to decide on how to manage the extra cash that you have. Saturn is also aspecting your 12th house. So it can be about understanding your spending habits and making some changes to avoid unnecessary expenses. Saturn's job here, when it influences the 12th house, is to reduce spending, but it needs to plan and budget first. So this is something that you may be thinking about over the coming months. And Jupiter will go retrograde in October and is also aspecting your 12th house. So definitely October, November time, your finances and expenditure will be on your mind. Saturn is in your 3rd house and is aspecting your 5th house. So this means that if you have children, they will be taking up a lot of your time. So you could have a lot of decisions you need to make around, your kids and the future and the school. So there's a lot of repeated responsibilities related to children. So you may have to, take them to different classes and activities and competitions. So this will be making you very busy. Saturn is aspecting your 9th house. So if you are a student, this is a good time to go over topics that you have learnt previously and do past exam papers. This is a good time to improve your study methods. The 9th house is about expanding your life. So when Saturn is aspecting here, it's a good time to decide on how you want to expand your life and which direction you want to go. For Aquarius natives, Saturn is the ruler of your chart and will be retrograde in your 2nd house of Pisces. So when Saturn is in the 2nd house, it makes you feel uncomfortable with your finances or the people that you are living with. So you can kind of feel stuck or trapped. So if you are an Aquarius moon person, let me know in the comment section how this Saturn transit is going for you so far in terms of your finances and family. So now when Saturn is retrograde, it's a time where the energy will influence your inner world, such as your feelings, your emotions, your memories. And it's a time where you will repeat things from the past, which can include visiting places where you were previously, or seeing old family members because it is in the second house. And if we look at your chart, Rahu is in the first house, which is an energy which moves in a backward motion. And now Saturn in the second house will also be moving backward. So during this period, you will be doing things which somewhat relate to the past. When Rahu is in the first house, it shows a little bit of an extravagant lifestyle. It means that you can be focused on fulfilling your personal desires. So with Saturn retrograde, any personal goal or ambition that you have always had and you always wanted to achieve in the past, or if there's anything that you wanted to do that hasn't been fulfilled, this is a time that you may try and make it happen. When Saturn is retrograde, it means that your authentic self can come out a little bit more. And Rahu is an energy that is seeking, that likes to experiment. So this is a time you can try to fulfill any desire that you have always had from the past. So it could be, for example, traveling to a place that you always wanted to visit, or spending money on some sort of experience. When the Lord of the chart, Saturn, is retrograde, in respect to health, this can be a time where you might have a medical checkup. So some people have yearly checkups after they reach a certain age, or if you have suffered from any health problem in the past, you will go through your usual health checkups during this time. The second house represents money and assets. And Saturn retrograde here can show something changing in this area of your life. So firstly, this can be work related, where there could be changes in your job which could affect your finances. This transit can show a reorganization of your finances. If your lifestyle or circumstances have changed, then therefore you may feel the need to review your financial goals. The second house is also the house of family, so there could be some responsibilities related to the past, or some sort of unresolved issues which you may have to manage during this period. And Saturn is also aspecting your 8th house, so this can be a time you can make changes to insurance policies, or a time where you may make changes to any will. And this could be a time where you can also claim money from any insurance company. Because Saturn is ruling your 12th house, when it is retrograde in the second house, you are re-examining your values and letting go and releasing what no longer serves you and what you no longer need. So for example, the second house, it includes physical things that you own, things that you value. So it includes anything tangible that you own and which is worth some money. So for example, furniture. So during this time, you may sell things that you have in your house. So it could be that your financial circumstances have changed and you're trying to make some extra cash, so you can sell things which you no longer use or need around your house during this Saturn retrograde period. So this is a good time to clear things out. This is a good time for a spring clean. And Saturn is also aspecting your 4th house. So home and family related events are things that you need to sort out over the next 4 or 5 months. For Pisces natives, Saturn will go retrograde in your 1st house in the sign of Pisces. So now for Pisces people, when Saturn transits the 1st house, especially from the moon, there will be a new project or something new happening in your life which you are working towards. So for example, you might have changed jobs recently, or you might have family or health responsibilities now, or you might have moved, or you are in the process of taking some new responsibility in your life. So it's a time where you need to take responsibility and bring structure to your own life. So if you are a Pisces moon person, let me know in the comment section how this Saturn transit is going for you so far. So now, when Saturn is retrograde in the first house in transit, it can be a period of introspection where you'll be reflecting on your choices. You'll be evaluating your feelings and trying to understand yourself a little bit better. Thinking about the past is a natural human tendency, but during this Saturn retrograde period, it can be on a much deeper level. And the obstacles sometimes people face can be internal, such as self-doubting yourself, overthinking, or criticizing yourself. So sometimes we all think that we could have done this better or we could have done that better. But instead of criticizing yourself, this is a time you can learn from your mistakes. So that's probably the key thing you have to remember during the next 4 or 5 months. When Saturn is retrograde in the first house, it's a time where you may have to repeat or redo things that you may have already done this year. So for example, if you find yourself studying, you may repeat an exam. Or if you're going through a health issue, you may have to visit the doctor again. So there can be a recurring theme in your life over the next 4 and 5 months. Now, also, if there has been anything that you have been putting off, then this retrograde period is a time to resolve that thing. So if you have a health issue which you are not doing anything about, then this is a time that you need to get that medical checkup. In terms of health, Saturn is a heavy planet, and when it is retrograde, the energy can be more intense. So this is a time you could suffer from headaches, especially if you are a Pisces moon person, because you can feel this enormous pressure on your shoulders. In terms of work and career, when Saturn is retrograde in the first house, it signifies something changing in your job or something changing psychologically regarding your work. So if we look at your transit chart, K2 is in the 6th house and Jupiter is in the 4th house, aspecting your 10th house. So both of these energies are influencing your career. So this can be a time with Saturn retrograde, this can be a time where a person can revert back to their original job. So if you have been covering someone, this is a time you're kind of going back to your substantive position, or the level of work you are doing can be beneath you. So you can feel like the work that you're doing, it's too basic for you. And as such, you don't feel worthy enough at the place you work for. So the work you are doing or the salary you are receiving, you can feel like you are going backwards rather than making those forward strides in your career. So this is a phase where contentment is required. Saturn is ruling your 11th house. So this is a time someone from the past may be on your mind constantly because of some feelings of love and attraction, or some sort of unresolved emotion can be lingering. This is also a time an old friend can contact you and you'll be able to reconnect. So if you look at your chart, these planetary combinations in transit are all showing a period of solitude. So you might have been feeling lonely, or you might want to just be on your own rather than outside. So you might be traveling on your own, you might be feeling isolated. So this is a year for you to grow spiritually. So what that means is connecting with something greater than yourself. So you might find peace by going to a religious place of worship. And this is a time where you have to put your ego to one side and live more inclusively.